Tuning in on our Facebook page or YouTube page, welcome back. We're going to keep the programming going on. We got one solid hour. If you missed anything so far, Jade or Bambi, these programs are being loaded to the Nikon Live site right now, so you can check them out as many times as you want. This next photographer, amazing woman who I've known for many, many years, Jen Rozenbaum, is a Nikon ambassador, but that's not her story. She's got a great story to tell about her own personal life and struggles, and she uses her personal life to help many, many women, empower them and show them their beauty. I'm so fond of this lady, and I could go on for hours with this, but you guys want to hear from Nikon ambassador Jen Rozenbaum. Welcome to the Nikon Theater.
Thank you. I mean, we have a half an hour, Mike, if you want to say a few more nice things about me. Hey guys, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here, and I am honored, as always, to be on the Nikon stage. It's a very special privilege. So I'm going to talk to you guys today. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this. Okay. I'm going to talk to you guys today about beautiful light, beautiful subject. Lighting is really a tough thing, right? There's so many different options. I mean, you could walk this trade show and you could see all different types of light, and it's nerve-wracking. What do I use to make somebody look good? What do I use to tell a story? So I hope in the next half an hour, we can spend a little bit of time to talk about light and how I use it to tell women's stories. So I love this quote, and I really want you guys to think about this. We can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men and women are afraid of the light. Okay, it's such a beautiful quote. Why is it beautiful? Because this is what we do, right? This is what we do. Photography is light. I want you to think about that a little bit. I think oftentimes we think that photography is just about capturing something or just about taking a memory, but it's not just that. What photography actually is, in a technical term, is capturing the light. And that is why it's so important. So we have to first, before we tell our camera what to capture, show it what to capture. We have to make decisions on what we want our camera to see. I know many of you, I see a lot of familiar faces, were in my posing class yesterday, and I talked quite a bit about that with posing also, right? We have to be on the same page as our camera. You and your camera are a team. You have to see the same thing. So to do that, I need to shine light, literally, on what I want my camera to see, and that's how I decide what we want to capture. Okay, so photography is light. So if you have fear, if there's a little nervousness inside you right now, even as I'm talking, and you're thinking, oh gosh, she's going to try to get me to use lights, and I just like to use the sun, and I don't know what to do, open your mind just a little bit, because once you start changing your light and really working with it and having variation, you can have amazing work and a lot more creativity, because we all kind of struggle, right, with that creativity and the inspiration. So open your mind to that just a little bit. All right, so what makes for successful light? If you've ever taken a class from me, this slide might look familiar, actually. We talked about it yesterday in posing. This is very similar. There's three things that when you look at a photo, I want you to look at every time you see a picture. So when you're going through your pictures and you're deciding whether it's a keep or a toss, these are the three qualities you're going to look for. Number one, it flatters your subject. Duh. Right? Like that's an obvious one, we think. Except that it's not always the truth. We've all seen unflattering photos, especially of ourselves, right? I said this story yesterday, but I'm going to say it again. I always get phone calls from friends that are like, Jen, there's this picture of me on Facebook. I'm panicking. Can you help me? Do I really look like this? It's so ugly. And my answer to them is usually like, no, there's a lot of problems here. You know, it's first of all, you're probably drunk in the picture, you're at the club, it's like blue light that's coming from up here, it's not attractive, it's not flattering you. So no, you don't really look like that. There's a lot of problems here. But this is how the human psyche works, especially for women, by the way. We could see 1,000 beautiful pictures of ourselves and one bad one, and which one do we believe? The bad one, right? That's what happens, and that bad one gets stuck in our head. So it's a responsibility, you guys. Like what we do in photography, especially in boudoir, is a very big responsibility. And we want to make sure that we are going to flatter our subject, okay? So what does flattering mean? Flattering means they look as good as they look in real life, if not better. Okay? I don't know what if not better means. That's a conversation between you and your client. Your client might say, I have a big nose, can you diminish that with light? Or I have really beautiful eyes, can you make them look even bigger or brighter or bluer or whatever they want? So that's a conversation you and your client or you and your subject need to have. But you should at least make your subject look as good as they look to your eyes. If they look worse than they look in real life, it is not successful. It is not good lighting. Okay? Especially with lighting, even more so than posing, I think sometimes we could really mess up somebody's face good with bad lighting. You know, we really need to be careful about that. So be really observant. The second thing is that it gets your point across. Light is beautiful for this purpose. Light creates a mood. Light creates a story. We can highlight something. We can diminish something. We can show the viewer what we want them to see. So you want to make sure that whatever your story is that you're trying to tell, you're going to match that with beautiful light. Okay, so there's a thought process behind this. This can't just be, I'm going to throw up a light and I'm just going to start taking pictures. What story are you trying to tell? One of the things that I think is missing the most from photography and most photos, if you really look at them, is intention. What is intention? Intention is what you're trying to show, what you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell, what you want the viewer to see. Now, often when I teach a workshop, a photographer will get up to photograph somebody. There's lights set up, there's cameras there, and I say, okay, you know, and they'll get up and they'll say, I don't know what to do. I'm so intimidated. I don't know where to begin. And my answer to them is always, what is your intention? That is the roadmap for making decisions. So if they then say to me, well, this model is a fitness model, and I really want to show off her abs, and I want to make her look really strong and kind of dangerous. Okay, well, great. We have that decision. Now we know how to light her. We know how to pose her. We know what we're trying to do. So lighting her, maybe I would put the light up top so it kind of goes over her muscles, or I'd bring it to the side. I wouldn't flat light her, for example. So once you have an intention, it helps guide your decisions as far as what you're going to do, posing, wardrobe, and then light especially. So if you're looking for something sexy, serene, whatever it might be, if you're looking for something bright and airy, you're not going to choose a really small light source with a strip box, right? That's a wrong decision. You're not going to match. So you have to make it all work together. So great light helps you tell your story, and it gets your point across. The third thing that great light does, it creates interest in your image. If you see my photography, oftentimes it is just a woman in front of a blank wall, a white wall, a gray wall. There's not much environment usually. So I want to make sure that I'm using light to create interest in my image. What does that mean? It means reflections. It means shapes, highlights, shadows. We're using it to create a composition in our image. Okay? When there's nothing else, we can use light to help us. So we're going to break this down. Again, knowing when you look at a picture, how do you know if the light is successful? So we're going to break it down just a bit. Number one, again, it flatters your subject. I want you to memorize this. It has to make your client or your subject look as good as they look in real life, if not better. Memorize that. That's why every time you see a photo, I want you to say, does she look as good as she looks in real life or better? If so, you can keep it. If not, dump it. And by the way, on that note, you cannot edit bad lighting. You just can't. So you might be able to edit a little bit of a bad pose or a little bit of not great wardrobe, but you cannot edit bad lighting. In fact, it works the opposite way. Great lighting takes away from your editing time. And if you're like me, I'm all for that. I don't really love spending time in front of the computer to edit, so I want to make sure that the light is always good. Okay, so how do we use it to flatter the subject? The first thing that we do is, stand out of the way of the letters, the wording, is we use light and shadow to define the body. Just like I mentioned, if you were shooting somebody in the fitness arena, or a client often will come to me and say, Jen, I can't wait to do a shoot with you. I just lost 40 pounds. Well, okay, I want to show her body. I want to show all that hard work that she did. So we're going to use it to shape the body. As you can see here, these are both natural light, and I'm just using the light to shape her. Now, we're always looking for light and shadow, for the most part. We'll talk a little bit about flat lighting and whatnot. But the one thing I find that photographers are more scared of than light is shadows. Yeah, I'm getting a yes. How many of you are afraid of shadows? I get that all the time. I teach workshops. They're like, there's a shadow in the picture. I'm like, well, that's how light works. When you put light on something, it creates a shadow. So we have to get those shadows to work to our advantage. So you can see in both of these examples, I have shadows, but I'm not afraid of them. I'm highlighting the shape. I'm using the light to make her look good, giving interest to the image, telling a story, and it all really works together. And because it's natural light, I can't control where it's coming from. The windows are there, so I have to think about where do I want to put my subject? How do I want the light to fall on her? So we still have to manipulate the light, even if you're a natural light shooter. Same thing here. We're using the light and the shadow to define her stomach, to show off the curves of her body, to give her a little bit of light on her face so that we see a little bit of that feminine detail, right? I'm a boudoir photographer. I always want to see lips. They're very feminine and beautiful. I don't want them to be in shadow. I want to get a little highlight there just to show off her body. I love this, just the little highlights on her legs, creating a nice triangle that creates interest in our image. Same thing here. This is actually my old studio in Queens, and Queens, New York. Yay! Any New Yorkers out there? Yeah, woohoo! What I love about this is that I have a huge window in that studio, and I often like to shoot with natural light, but sometimes you want a different look. This was a client that came to me for a second shoot, so when clients come to a boudoir shoot for the second time or the third time, you're challenged to create something totally different that they didn't get the first time, right? Because you want to make sales, of course. So instead of shooting natural light, we used all artificial light here, and we created much darker, moodier images, and she absolutely loved them. It was in contrast to the lighter, brighter images we did the first time. So I wasn't worried. I knew, all right, she's going to come in, I'm going to try something different, and this light flatters her. She came to me because she was training for a bikini competition or a fitness competition, and she said, you know, this is the best I've ever looked in my entire life. What a disappointment it would be if I did not light her properly and show off all that hard work that she did. Okay, we're going to use light and shadow to emphasize and de-emphasize parts of the body. This is a perfect example here where, you know, most women have cellulite, let's face it, right? And I don't like to edit that. You can't edit cellulite properly. You just can't. It never looks good. So you have to decide how you're going to light her. In this case, instead of lighting her, I am darkening the areas that I don't want to edit. I'm taking them out of light. Okay, so I'm doing that on purpose. Same thing here. There's some, she had some cellulite or some stretch marks. I don't want to edit that. So how do we take it out of the picture so it's not an issue? We put it in shadow. Okay, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. That's it, okay? So we're going to use light and shadow to define. And also here, we're using just a sliver of light just to create beautiful shape, make her the interest in the image, and it's making life easier for us. Like I said, later, we don't have to do as much editing. Okay, always make sure you're checking your angles. Sorry, guys, I just can't see over there. It's too small. The best shot might not be where you think it is. So oftentimes, we'll set up a light. How many of you resonate with this? You'll set up a light, you'll have a subject in front of you, and you're sort of in competition with the light. Anybody ever do that? Like, I might even wrap myself around the light stand and take a picture because the light and I are in the same place, right? That happens often. What I want you guys to learn is something I call solar systeming. I want you to start walking around, seeing where other shots might be. I see this very often in workshops where everybody will be standing in one place, and I'll break away, and I'll be like, hey, guys, look over here. There's another whole shot here. So, you know, time is money. If you could light one way and get more than one look, that's amazing. So every time you light your subject, I want you to start walking around, looking for different things, seeing if there's other ways to see it. So, for example, this was a picture I took quite a while ago, and I posed the client, and she's got a great body, and she looks amazing, and I'm standing with the light, and I'm like, I don't think that this is where my shot is. Let me see what it looks like from the other side. So now the light is over there, and I'm over here, and I take a picture of her, and look at the difference. Nothing else changed, just my angle. Angles are highly underused with photographers. I'm talking about up, down, left, right. You need to be looking all over the place. In my case, often a step stool. Okay, so if you're short like me, I'm almost never not on a step stool. I want to see what light looks like in all different places. So again, we're going from this to this. Her, you know, because we're seeing the pose different, also there's other changes, but just look at how the light hits her stomach, hits her chest, hits her face. It's so much more flattering like this. Okay, and I didn't have to change anything except take 3 or 4 steps one direction. That's it. Okay, let's move on to successful lighting gets your point across. So, and it tells your story. So how are we going to do that? There's different types of light that we use. The number one thing I want to talk about is flat light. And I think that this is where most photographers start, right? Because flat light is really pretty flattering on everybody. Okay, some people especially. If you're shooting a client that doesn't have very good skin or has a lot of issues with their skin, flat light is a really great option. What is flat light? Basically, you have the subject and then the light flat to their face. Okay, so it might be that they're standing in front of a window. In this case, you can see here, there's a mirror behind her and there's a window in front of her. Can you see that? So I'm standing between the window and her. So she's being fully lit. There's not a lot of shadow here. And this is why I say a lot of people are afraid of shadows, because they start with flat light, and then once we start incorporating shadows into the work, they get very nervous. But it's flattering. It's beautiful. And honestly, if you have a client with like light eyes, and we're getting the light in there, their eyes look really bright, and they'll say to me, "Did you edit my eyes?" I'm like, "No, I didn't touch them. That's really what they look like." So it's a really flattering light. It makes it really easy to edit. But you know, it only goes so far. Right? At some point, we want to get a little bit more creative. We want to do some different things. But flat light flatters pretty much everybody. This was actually also my old studio in Queens. We weren't allowed on the roof. So it's the first place I went when I got the studio. It's like when somebody says, "Don't look down," it's the first thing you do, right? So I used to sneak up to the rooftop. And really what I'm doing here is she's flat lit, but I'm also sort of keeping her in controlled shadow here, in shade, I mean, because I don't want her to be out on the roof midday, bright light. She's still sort of guarded over her, so she's not getting the full daylight, but she's getting a lot of reflection from the rooftop. The rooftop was silver. It was really cool. So I would be out there sweating, and you know, she's all looking sexy and pretty. But it's flattering. And then this was in a studio actually in Minnesota, and it was snowing that day. And there was just a tiny little window, but it was enough for me to get really nice, kind of softbox in the sky type of light, and create an image like this. But it's flat light. You can see there's not a lot of shadow. We're just putting a lot of light on her. And it is a beautiful method, and it is a very sellable method. Clients really like this type of light. But sometimes we want to do something different. We want to create a different light, something a little bit moodier. How many people here love moody photos? I do too. I go back and forth. And sometimes you're just trying to tell a story. You need a moodier photo to tell a story. So this is where the fear of shadows needs to be left behind, because moodier photography most certainly has shadows in it. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip for moody photography. And these are artificial light. There's 2 lights in each of these images. So even though there's 2 lights, it's still giving me the mood. Here's the number one tip that I can give you that most people don't understand. Moody photography does not mean underexposed photography. Okay? Your highlights should still be exposed properly. You can lose some detail in the shadows if you choose to. It's a little hard to tell here, but I lose a little bit of her hair, and maybe I would put a little more light on it next time, but maybe a little bit of the clothing you lose in shadow a little bit. That's okay. But the things that you're highlighting, they need to be properly exposed. They cannot be overexposed, and they cannot be underexposed. I often see photos where people will send me for constructive criticism, and they say, "I'm trying to be a little moodier. Does this look good?" And I'm like, "No, that's just underexposed. It's different. The whole image, there's no highlights, there's no shadows, there's no contrast." So if you want moodier photography, you need to make sure that you're exposing correctly. This is an image. I actually put it on my Instagram today. This is actually my living room. So one of the things that I want to tell you is, if you think you need a fancy studio to shoot in, you don't. Sometimes you just need a space. So this is my living room in my house, and I have a bunch of windows. The ones in the front are north facing, so that makes these east facing. So what I'm doing here is actually a little bit of a combination of flat light on her face and the light coming in from the window just to kind of brush over her body here. Now, again, I'm losing a little bit of detail down here. I don't really care. That's not what this photograph is about. So it doesn't matter. In fact, it almost draws our eyes to where we want it to go. All right, so that's, again, just sort of using natural light to my advantage. Same thing here. And we're getting a little reflection, which is fun, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But again, she works really hard on her body. We want to make sure that we're showing that off, and we're able to do that by creating a little bit of moodier light. Don't be afraid of the shadows. This is the same model that was in the bathtub, but this is a different scenario. The light is actually behind her, coming from the window, and then behind me is a white wall, so it's acting as a reflector. This is unedited. This is straight out of camera. But what you can see is that we're getting really some nice backlight on her hair, which really, that's what this image is about, right? I mean, her hair is spectacular. And we are getting a little bit of just these highlights. This is where they're so important. Like, this highlight allows us the separation of her legs, so we understand she doesn't just have one big leg here. So the highlights are really all falling in the right place. This image here was taken in my current studio that has north-facing light, which is amazing because the light is beautiful all the time. This situation was when I went to a friend's house to do a shoot, and she had just moved in. She built a beautiful house, and I realized like a day or two before that she hadn't put up curtains yet. So I started, and her whole house was windows, and I started having a little anxiety of like, well, you know, what happens if it's a really sunny day and the light's not falling in the right place? And luckily I woke up and it was cloudy, which is very fortunate that day. You know, she said, oh, it's raining. And I was like, no, thank goodness it's raining. So we were able to create something a little moodier. And you can see she had some like concrete outside and white poles, and they gave me just enough reflection and brightness to come into the window that I just picked this little pocket of light and I put the model in that spot. Okay, so sometimes we don't just use one light, we use multiple lights. And why do I do that? It creates different looks. So here, again, we're using the light to give us a little bit of highlight on her on this side. We're using a light on this side, and now she's not going to blend into the background. It's giving us a little bit of hair light. It's creating interest. Here, I put a light behind her and a light in front of her, and it gives her sort of that beautiful glow, which I love for her. I use the same thing here, same concept here, just two lights and a reflector. These are barely edited, you guys. This is what I'm talking about. If you can light beautifully and get good light on your subject, it's amazing. And it tells a story. Remember I told you most of my photos don't have any background. They don't have anything else to tell the story except the client. So we want to use the light to tell the story. Okay, and we also want light to create interest in our images, right? So how do we do that? One of the things that I look for often is geometric patterns. I love the play of a linear element based off of the curves of a woman's body. I think that it's really fun, and we can use it for framing, we can use it for interest. So this is a perfect example. This was my old studio in Queens. And by the way, you guys, this studio was 200 square feet. So, and that was pretty impressive for Queens, actually. But this is one of the ways, light is one of the ways that I could take 200 square feet and make it look different all the time. So clients would come in for their shoot and be very disappointed, actually. They would come into the studio and go, oh, this is it? Like, this is it, but this is all I need. All I really need is a 200-foot box that I could light and change all different ways. Now, from November to March, when daylight savings time changed, at around 11 o'clock-ish, this is what would happen in my studio if it was a sunny day. The light would just hit the shades exactly. I knew I was going to use the lines. I was going to create interest in the image. And this is something that we would get. Now, what I did here is I posed her in a way to mimic the framing. So the posing is done on purpose to mimic the framing. And it's always interesting when you do this. I don't know how many of you do this, but I'll take the picture, and then we're like changing something. I'll be like, okay, take a step, like an inch. Like the light moves really fast. Take a step, like an inch to the left, inch to the left. So we're always chasing the light when we're doing something like this. It's actually really fun, and the clients like it. But this creates interest in the image. Okay? This is an image she can't take herself. That is vitally important. Do you know why? Because they need us. That's vitally important, guys. So use light to create things that clients cannot replicate for themselves. You can use light to make your client the focus of the image. And this is a perfect example. This is a light with barn doors. So I use the barn doors to take away all the other environmental stuff around her and just really focus the light in on her. And now you don't see anything there except her. And that's what I want. I really want her to be the focus of the image there. Same thing here, using the light. I mean, this is like my happy place, guys. Most people walk into a room like this that just has like a white wall, and they're like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, give this to me all day long. This is amazing, because we can create anything that we want. It's a blank slate. Same thing here, just using a little bit of light in a little black room, actually, just to highlight exactly what we want. Two lights. Here we're using two lights as well. This was actually also in my living room. And you know how I have windows all over the place? Sometimes the light gets muddy like that. Sometimes there's really no like direct light source and everything's kind of flat. And when I took a picture of her at first, I was like, oh, this is just super flat. I can't tell, like she looks the same level as the couch. So I popped a light in just kind of over her head. And if you can see, it gives us a little bit of pop. So I'm using a combination here of daylight and artificial light to create what I want to see. Okay, another thing that I do here to create something interesting is use reflections. I do this quite often. I love reflections. I think that they're super fun. Again, they're a way to create interest in your image. In this case, this is actually a bathroom. So I don't know why, but hotels lately are building these showers with the half glass door. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, it's freezing in there. I don't know why they do that, but it works to your advantage when you're a photographer because we can play around with that. So I'm standing in front of the window, she's standing behind the glass door, and I'm just getting the reflection of the window in there, and it creates interest. The second one is also behind a shower door, but she's not in the shower. I opened the shower door, put her behind it. I stood on the other side of the door, and the reflection is just some shades behind me. So again, I'm always looking for some linear elements to create interest in the image. Back to my living room, I have a glass coffee table, and when the light hits it just right, we can get a beautiful reflection. And this is what I like to say, that even if you're a portrait photographer, you're also a landscape photographer, right? This is really all this is a landscape, and we want to make sure we're using the light to get that reflection. Same thing here. This is actually my dining room. You guys are getting a house tour today. It's great. This is actually my dining room. I have some mirrored furniture, and I was able to use the mirrors just to give me a little bit of reflection and create something a little bit different. Same thing here. This is one of my friends and a fellow breast cancer survivor. So we were doing some breast cancer portraits of her. And this reflection here is actually a picture frame that was sitting on the piece of mirrored furniture. And then this reflection here is from the mirrored furniture. And then this is her standing in my dining room. So we're just kind of creating something different, straight out of camera, just something interesting, using light as a reflector. Same thing here. This is a combination of daylight and artificial light. This is from a workshop that I taught, and there was a big mirrored table, and I had to sit under the table and lift it with my leg. These are ninja moves, by the way. I don't recommend this unless you're like, you sit under the table, and I lifted it with my knee so it was angled at the right way that I could line this up perfectly because I didn't want to see parts of the couch. I just wanted it to kind of look seamless. So this is straight out of camera like this. This creates interest. This is so interesting in comparison to just having a picture of a woman laying on the couch, right? Creates interest. I love this quote too. In the right light at the right time, everything is extraordinary. And I think that you'll see that as you guys watch the other presenters here as well, especially the landscape photographers. I'm always so blown away by the things that they capture, but they're doing that, they're chasing light, right? We're always looking for good light. So in order to have that perfect light that looks beautiful and everything, we want to control the light. So I'm just going to show you an example of one model that I worked with, a picture of her with one light. It looks beautiful. There's nothing wrong with this photo at all. She looks great. But look what happens when we pop in two lights. Looks different, looks great, giving her some variety. And then what happens if maybe we change the light? So this is a one light also, but it's a different modifier. So now she looks different. It changes her face, right? This is a situation where we're using light to actually sculpt her face. So she has a pretty round face. It makes her look very young. What if she wanted to look a little bit older? Sometimes people do, shockingly. This maybe gives her a little bit more sculpture of the face, right? So I'm just showing you, there's not a right or a wrong. I'm just showing you the ability to change light, change what your client looks like. And that's where we say it flatters your subject. We have to make sure she looks as good as she looks in real life, if not better. This is an example of my studio. I have a white wall on one side and a black wall on the other side. And one shot I took natural light and one shot I took artificial light, and we're creating two completely different moods. Even though it's the same outfit, it's the same subject, it's the same idea, we're creating something totally different just by changing the light. And in this case, I'm using the light with a gel to create something, a different environment. I don't know why, but when I saw this location, I just kept thinking, I want red in here. I just think red will be great. And it's just a little bit more interesting than having just white light. So I used it to create a mood. And this is a situation, you saw this photo already. This is the one I showed you. But this is a light and a modifier. This is without a grid, and this is with a grid. So again, just making a small change by putting a grid on allows her to stand out from the background, right? Because we're keeping the light from hitting the background. So it's just a small change, but it gives a different feel. So you guys have to be in control of the light. You cannot let it scare you. You have to definitely be in charge. This is what you do as a photographer. It's not just this. It's the whole combination together. So I love this quote too. To love beauty is to see light. I really would love for you guys to take something that you learned today and bring it back home and try to experiment with light a little bit. You might find that you find something that you really love that's unique to you. It helps build your style. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. This is where you guys can find me if you want to find me. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram, especially with a lot of lighting tips, a lot of photography tips, posing tips. So if you want to join me there, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'm so thrilled that you sat in for the class today and that you guys watched at home. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jen Rosenbaum. Beautiful, awesome. Thank you so much.